Good morning. Excuse me. It is 6:37 a.m. on Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, last night, as part of Ghibli Fest, I went to see Kiki's Delivery Service on the big screen. I've talked about Ghibli Fest before. I think most recently when I went to see Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind in the same way, but it's limited engagement runs of classic Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki animated films, which I've seen before, but seeing on the big screen is nice. And so last night was Kiki's Delivery Service, which, if you are not familiar, is a charming, family-friendly little story about a 13-year-old girl who is a witch, and she at 13, apparently her family's tradition is that you have to leave home for at least a year to spend training on your own to learn independence, which is one of the things that that struck me watching this one is that I really enjoy the phrase that kept coming to mind was gentle fantasy of the world building, because this is a story where the technology of everything is maybe equivalent to, say, like the 1940s. And you've got a city that is somewhere in between, like Europe and America. This is like maybe a blend of like Munich and San Francisco or something like that. But the idea is Kiki and her family of witches have real magic, and witches are something that is uncommon, but people have heard of. And so seeing a witch flying around on a broom is not something that happens to you every day necessarily. I mean, you might live in a place where there are more witches and be more used to it. It's uncommon, but it happens. And so people tend to react a little bit more like, oh, hey, I saw, Brad Pitt at the grocery store. It's like, wow, that's cool, but it's not like, doesn't blow your mind, and it's interesting because, we talk about magical realism sometimes, and it's not quite that, but it's just, I think one of the things that's nice about it is that it's not treated as really a big deal. It's like it doesn't feel the need to say, oh, but witches are probably persecuted. And it's not to say there isn't a place for stories about persecution, because of course there are, but it also doesn't have to be in every story. Anyway, that's the main plot of Kiki's Delivery Service, is that she moves to this new city and she decides that she is going to earn a living by using her broom to fly around delivering packages for people. And she meets a very kind couple who run a bakery, who allow her to stay in their attic while she develops her business. And, she makes a few friends and, goes through a period where she starts to doubt herself and has to kind of rediscover her magic. And then she gets to save her new friend from a blimp disaster near the end, where the stakes feel high, but it's really, there's no bad guy. It's just that there's kind of a blimp accident that puts her friend in danger, and she has to save him. And it's kind of like My Neighbor Totoro in that way, that there is conflict and stakes that we care about, but there's no bad guy. There's no one, like, the worst people in Kiki's Delivery Service are mostly just kind of ungrateful or snobby. Like, there's one point where, let me get back into the other themes of the story, because there's the main plot, but there's also a very real element of Kiki's magic being kind of a metaphor for trying to make it on your own as an adult, doing something artistic. It's like being a witch is something people are impressed by, but it's not like they've never heard of it before. And so it's a little bit like, if you meet someone and say, "Oh yeah, I make a living as a painter." And you're like, "Oh wow, that's unusual. That's neat because not a lot of people can do that." And so the idea of having it be about artistic inspiration, there's just the ordinary stuff of her trying to just figure out the day to day. But then also she finds herself changing in unfamiliar ways as she deals with all these new experiences. And a couple of setbacks get her feeling a little bit depressed, and she finds that she stops being able to fly. And now it's like, oh no, what does this mean? What if I never get it back? And what do I do? And she meets an actual painter who helps her to kind of just realize that sometimes art or magic kind of comes from the spirit, and it's a little bit mysterious sometimes, which is part of what makes it wonderful, but also what can make it scary. And you have to just kind of trust that it is still within you. And it's just a really lovely sentiment, because it's all about just creativity and making art, and the truth of the spirit and that sort of thing. And I just really, it's lovely. And seeing it on the big screen, in particular, all of the various broom flying sequences are wonderful. Hayao Miyazaki has always been especially skilled at depicting flight in his movies. And if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. And I just adored it and was very happy to see it again. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for today. And I will talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.